So a lot of vegans worry about not getting enough protein in their diet, and so I thought I'd do a video to show you what 90 grams of protein might look like for a vegan in one day. For those of you who are watching or finding me for the first time, I'm Dr. Amina, a physician and health coach, and I help you to feel better by eating better. All right, so we're going to dive right into it. So actually what inspired me to do this video is my mother. She's a vegan. I'm vegetarian, lacto-ovite deficient, so my mother is actually vegan, and I fuss with her from time to time that she's not getting enough protein. And so I thought, you know what, let me just sort of do a little tally and go through how she and others might be able to get enough protein to sustain her. All right, now I'm going to give real food examples, because I think we should get as much of our nutrients as possible from actual food that we'll eat and chew, as opposed to from supplements. Now, supplements can be in addition to help supplement on those days where our intake might not be optimal, but we're going to use food examples. So let's get right into it. So for breakfast, for example, you can have a black bean patty or any bean patty bought, or you can boil your own beans and create your own bean patties. And one bean patty, particularly if it's black beans, will give you about 11 grams of protein. Pair that with 2 slices of multigrain sprouted seed bread, like those from Ezekiel, for example. They have a sprouted flax bread, and 1 slice of that bread has 5 grams of protein. So if, for example, you have 2 slices of this bread, you'll get 10 grams of protein from the bread, and pair that with the 11 grams from the bean burger, and you're going to have 21 grams of protein right there with breakfast. Of course, you can add your salad or whatever vegetables you want to go with that breakfast. So that's what you have there. Now that will help keep you satisfied until at least lunch, because you're eating a good breakfast. I promote eating more to weigh less. You're going to eat more nutritious food so that you're able to stay satisfied for several hours and keep yourself in fat burning mode, as opposed to being perpetually in fat storage mode, because you're constantly eating. And if you want to learn more about that, you can take my Eat More Weigh Less challenge, which really teaches you all about eating more to weigh less and ultimately feel better and be healthier. Okay, now moving on to lunch. So for example, lunch can be a half a cup of stewed red beans. Now yesterday we had red beans actually, and maybe I might have even more than half a cup, but half a cup of red beans will give you about 22 grams of protein. So that's not your 50-60 grams like from a serving of fish or meat, but 22 grams is really not bad. And if you pair those red beans with something like wild rice, a quarter cup of wild rice will give you about 4 grams of protein. If instead of wild rice you choose something like quinoa, half a cup of quinoa will give you the same, approximately 4 grams of protein. So for lunch, depending on how much you have, plus or minus, you will have about 26 grams of protein with lunch, which is, again, not bad at all. Now, say for example, after lunch or mid-afternoon, say after lunch, for me, it tends to be after lunch, I would have some mixed nuts, and I think of it as a dessert for myself, because nuts, if your taste buds are sensitive enough, have a little bit of a sweetish taste. And so I just kind of like them as a dessert and just to kind of top off my meal. Sometimes I might have it in the mid-afternoon, but from say a quarter cup of mixed nuts, you will get about 10 grams of protein. From that, I would have more oftentimes, almost half a cup, because I just love them, but let's just leave it at a quarter cup of mixed nuts, and that giving you about 10 grams of protein. And then now finally we get to dinner. And with dinner, say for example, you have something like tempeh. And tempeh, of course, is a curded or fermented soybean, very dense. You see the soybeans packed together. So it's a richer source of protein compared to tofu, which is a bit less dense. So from a serving of tempeh, and of course you look at your label to figure out how much a serving is, but that's going to be about a 1/3 cup of tempeh, and that will give you about 18 grams of protein. So not bad. When I was reviewing for this video, I was a little surprised to see that red beans actually have more protein than the soybean, the tempeh. But anyway, you'll have your tempeh, and if again you have maybe a slice of bread, you can potentially get an extra 4 grams. But say for example, because it's dinner and you don't want to have anything too heavy just before going to bed, you will pair this stewed tempeh with maybe some variety of vegetables, a salad, And so by the end of the day, between breakfast, lunch, your dessert / mid-afternoon snack, and then a dinner, you can have about 75 grams of protein, which is not bad at all. Now, the general daily allowance or recommendation for protein is to have 1 gram per kilogram body weight. So for somebody who is weighing 70 grams, which is the same as what 154 pounds, this 75 grams of protein is going to be pretty good. Now, of course, many people struggle with weight, so many people would actually be weighing more than that. So in those cases, they will have to sort of look at prioritizing or doubling up on some of the things that I mentioned. And if you're doubling up on things like beans and even nuts, it means that you probably gonna have to minimize the starch, because beans and nuts are already fairly not starch rich, but they're definitely not starch poor. And for people who are trying to lose weight, starch is one of the things that you want to be mindful of, because whenever you have starch, especially if it's more refined starch, that's going to be something that's going to break down into glucose into your bloodstream and cause the release of insulin. And of course, for anybody who is trying to lose weight, insulin is the enemy, because once insulin is on board, you will be in fat storage mode, because insulin is there to store away that glucose, and often excess glucose, because it's not being immediately burned, is going to end up being stored as fat. So for the average, well, maybe not so average right now, but a 70-gram person can essentially get 75 grams of protein from what I outlined there. Now, for a little extra supplementation, protein powders are a good addition. You can get from a serving of protein powder, which would be about 2 scoops for most brands, you'll get about 20 grams of protein. So for this person, say they were exercising, doing some weight training, you might want to increase your protein intake to help facilitate muscle building. And so adding a serving of protein powder, 2 scoops or 20 grams will now round you out at about 92 grams of protein for your 24-hour period, which is really not bad at all. I've seen a few videos where people talk about having 1 gram per pound of protein. Again, the requirements are not fixed, they're not set in stone. It's going to be different for everybody. Maybe for people who are really weight training, bodybuilding, muscle building, obviously they're going to need more. Maybe that recommendation is more geared towards those weight trainers. But for the average person, I mean, say for example, somebody's 154 pounds. I mean, getting 154 grams of protein, I think, is going to be pretty difficult to do, even for somebody who's a meat eater. So I hope the vegans and vegetarians find this helpful. I have had some people come to me asking me about, thinking of going vegan, because apparently there was a documentary on Netflix that has scared a lot of people off meat. And so they've been wondering, how am I going to get in my protein? But this video hopefully will help you to see how you can get these in. Now, of course, if you're not accustomed to eating these plant sources of protein, it might be a bit of a challenge. Also, because some of these plant sources, especially beans, are very rich in fiber, it might take your intestines, your gastrointestinal tract, a bit of time to get used to all that fiber. So that's something to bear in mind. But if you found this video helpful, then feel free to share it with somebody else who may benefit. Thanks for watching.